Breaking news, the United States President Donald Trump has announced that a trade deal between India and the United States will take place, and there would be an immediate reciprocal tariff lowering. I'm going to read out his statement, which he's posted on Truth Social. He says, "It was an honor to speak with Prime Minister Modi of India this morning. He is one of my greatest friends and a powerful and respected leader of his country. We spoke about many things, including trade and ending the war with Russia and Ukraine. He agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more from the United States and potentially Venezuela. This will help end the war in Ukraine, which is taking place right now, with thousands of people dying each and every week. Out of friendship and respect for Prime Minister Modi, and as per his request, effective immediately, we agreed to a trade deal between the United States and India, whereby the United States will charge a reduced reciprocal tariff, lowering it from 25% to 18%. They will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to zero. The Prime Minister also committed to Buy American at a much higher level, in addition to over $500 billion of US energy, technology, agriculture, coal, and many other products. Our amazing relationship with India will be even stronger going forward. Prime Minister Modi and I are two people that get things done, something that cannot be said for most. Thank you for your attention to this matter." So that's typically delivered as the US President does. Now, basically, I'm going to go through the operative part of this. Number one, India is going to be importing oil from Venezuela per Trump. Per Trump, India is going to stop importing oil from Russia. As a result of this, and per Trump, as per the request of the government of India, the US will charge a reduced reciprocal tariff, lowering it from 25% to 18%. This will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the US to zero. Shiv Arur joins us now for more on this. So Shiv, late in the evening, we've got an announcement from the US President saying that a trade deal is through. We'll wait for the External Affairs Ministry, because I think that's important just to get this interpretation correct.
Absolutely correct, Vishnu. This is a huge piece of breaking news coming in late tonight, and NDTV's analysis and breaking news coverage of the tensions between India and the United States leading to some kind of a ceasefire have proven absolutely true. You've been reporting on that as well. Very important to note that Trump here has explicitly announced that he and Prime Minister Modi have arrived and agreed on a trade agreement. I'm assuming this means that it will be formally signed in the foreseeable future, in the next few days. Remember, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar happens to be in the United States at this time. I'm presuming that the loose ends of whatever negotiations have been happening, Vishnu, have been tied up by Dr. S. Jaishankar and his team, along with Secretary Marco Rubio. But this is an intercontinental newsquake, because after a year of suspense, frictions, tensions, turbulence, unprecedented tariffs imposed by the US on India, a very warm message by Trump where he calls Prime Minister Modi one of my greatest friends and a powerful and respected leader of his country. He says, "We spoke about many things, including trade. He agreed to stop buying Russian oil." That's going to be an interesting point, to get a corroboration from the Indian side on, Vishnu. But the main point of all of this is that we agreed to a trade deal between the United States and India. And he says, out of friendship and respect for Prime Minister Modi, as per his request, effective immediately, we agreed to the trade deal and will charge a reduced reciprocal tariff, lowering it from 25% to 80%. They will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to zero. The Prime Minister also committed to Buy American at a much higher level, in addition to over $500 billion of US energy. So there are basically three parts to this, Vishnu, very quickly. He talks about the two leaders arriving at a trade deal that should be announced. B, the mention of Russian and potentially Venezuelan oil. given how controversial that's been in the international context. We'll have to see what the Indian External Affairs Ministry says about that. And C, the tariffs have been reduced with immediate effect. The words used by Trump, carry his signature kind of warmth and informality. He says, out of great respect for Modi, he calls him one of his greatest friends. He says he's a loved and respected leader in his country. He describes this as an act that has been done by two people who can get things done, which cannot be said of many others. So this is brand Trump in full blast, describing what I'm hoping the Indian side will corroborate with their own statement very shortly, Vishnu. It's going to be interesting.
I will bring Aditya in on this, but my reading of the statement is that in as much as there is a trade deal which is likely to happen, the point where Trump says they as in India, will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to zero, will exclude certain areas. For example, the agriculture sector, the farming sector, the poultry sector is something we've got huge concerns about. Those are absolute no-go areas for us. So I'd like to really read the fine print of what is included in this trade deal. There are cultural reasons, religious reasons why we cannot, for example, accept American poultry products, because that poultry is fed, is fed meat, and therefore it is unacceptable for us to accept that. That's one of the reasons, one of the areas which was a no-go area. Aditya, important to wait to see what the fine print is?
Well, certainly it's a big announcement nonetheless between India and United States. It was on cards for some time. There was some final, discussions that were underway over the last 48 to 72 hours. We had spoken to top sources in the government of India who confirmed that this is nearing closure, both the MEA and the Ministry of Commerce. And now finally we have a trade deal in place. The tariffs have been reduced from 25% to 18%. These are some very critical developments. And himself, Donald Trump, announcing the same means that he meant business. And certainly after tough negotiations from both sides, it has been achieved. Obviously, Vishnu, you talk about the agriculture, the dairy sector, those are very important sectors which are no-go areas. Very stringent rules apply there. We saw a similar situation when it comes to the India-EU trade deal as well. But this time, Modi and Trump have sealed it finally after a phone call. There are details that Trump has given. He has said that Modi has agreed to completely stop buying Russian oil, also buy Venezuelan oil. And at the same time, we will have to wait and watch the final print of the trade deal once it is signed and the details given out. But nonetheless, it's a big development between New Delhi and Washington, D.C. And clearly, it could change the dynamics also when it comes to geopolitics and more closeness between the Trump administration and the Indian government.
There's another key part, Aditya and Shiv, that I'd like to point out. Remember, while tariffs have gone down from 25% to 18%, we also had an additional amount on our imports of Russian oil. Has that disappeared? That's key. Raymond Vickery joins us at this stage. Let me get a quick reaction from Mr. Vickery on this. Is this a completely done deal? Everything hunky-dory, or do you believe that the truth will lie in the fine print?
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment. It seems to me that with President Trump, nothing is ever a completely done deal. Whether or not you're going to have a U-turn on matters depends upon his assessment of what's in his interest as a transactional person at any one time. Nevertheless, this is a welcome development. These are the two largest democracies, and I would argue the greatest democracies in the world. There is not a single problem in the world that can't be helped, ameliorated, or even solved by cooperation between India and the U.S. The track that we have been on has been a downward path, completely contrary to what's been going on for the last 30, 35 years, and many people on the Indian side and U.S. side have devoted much of their lives to. So it's a welcome development, but of course I want to see what the Indian government says about this, because we have in the past seen that President Trump will interpret things to his own advantage. He's a great reality television star and gets the most out of it. But then you have to see what the other side has to say. We've seen this in regard to Gaza. We've seen it numerous times in regard to Ukraine.
And Mr. Vickery, there's another point which I feel I need to mention. For example, Donald Trump, in his Truth Social message, has said that India will commit to spending $500 billion from the United States in areas such as tech, coal, etc., etc. That number is a huge number. And until we get clarity on what those areas are, when we're going to actually import that, it just seems like a number. It could be anything.
Well, you're exactly right. 500 billion over what period of time, for what products, with what kind of reservations go on. So these things are tossed out. President Trump makes good television. We're all talking about what he has to say. And it's considered a great win for him. We should not be too pessimistic about it, but I think the damage has been done by President Trump in regard to the reliability of the United States as a key partner. For years, there have been those in India who said the problem with the United States is they're not reliable. We've tried to overcome that for the last 30 years to show reliability, and of course, the last year has been exactly in the opposite direction. So one tweet does not make an absolute change in the trajectory, but the underlying reality is whether it's economically, strategically in regard to China, whether it's building prosperity for the the average man and woman, there is so much in common that we can't allow this Donald Trump transactional approach to derail it. And it seems that at least we're giving an open now that saner heads on both sides can get this relationship back on track the way it should be.
So two key points which I'd like to just mention. Number one, what about that additional 25% on tariffs that were invoked on account of buying Russian crude? Has that disappeared? Because Trump has spoken about it going from 25% to 18%. No answers right now. And when Donald Trump talks about 500 billion in terms of Indian imports from the United States, it's unclear what he's referring to. He says energy, tech, is that over and above the trade deal? Are those deals which India and the US can expect? If so, what is the time period? So, Aditya, you'd agree that, it's great news if there is a trade deal because, India and the US, natural allies at a basic sense, but lots of questions over here, no clear answers.
Well, certainly a lot of questions, and these will be answered perhaps in the next few days when the final print is out in there. But you're right. India has enjoyed bipartisan support from the United States, and there were concerns raised by several members of parliaments and senators on the trade deal that this needs to be done as soon as possible. You cannot impose such kind of tariffs on close partners like India. But to an extent, we can say that is behind us. Finally, there's been agreement, there's been some consensus that's been achieved. There was a strategic bilateral partnership for the last 2 decades, and that is now being taken forward. Of course, we'll have to wait and watch because every other day, the new geopolitical tensions are turning the wind when it comes to trade, commerce, and the strategic partnership between even long allies like New Delhi and Washington, D.C. Sergio Gore has been here. He was somebody who was close to Donald Trump. And finally, many expected that once he landed here, there would be some important developments that take shape. And that is what has finally happened. He met Jaishankar 2 days ago. And today, just before the clinching of this deal and the final announcement, we had Sergio Gore tweeting out about the conversation between Modi and Trump. We still do not know the final print of that conversation and what was agreed to. We also do not know the final print of the trade deal. That perhaps will be out in open when it finally happens between these two countries. But a lot of questions from oil to the sanctions that have been imposed in the past and how India will navigate all of that.
So again, a few more questions as I look at what has been mentioned. And Mr. Vickery, I'm not being a pessimist. I'm just trying to point out areas which are unanswered. I believe a trade deal is in the interest of both countries. But Trump says they will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the US to zero. But he's not identified the areas where this is going to take place. There are clear red lines. for example, in dairy for India, which we cannot accept, maybe zero in other areas. But that doesn't seem to have found mention over here at all. Mr. Vikri?
No, I don't think it has, and it's typical for President Trump's approach to not have details, and then when asked about them, saying that it's all in his favor. We've seen this with the Vietnam trade agreement. We've seen it with Indonesia. We've seen it with Japan. Things which are represented as solved are not solved at all. And of course, the basic problem is where does the international community going forward? We've had a World Trade Organization before that, a general agreement on tariffs and trade, which had in place a multilateral rule of law, standards-based approach to international trade. And this has been completely torpedoed by this transactional one-to-one and then announcement really in a few lines, something which in the past would have taken years. And if you look at the EU-India agreement, you see that it's pages and pages of detail, which was negotiated over 19 years. And none of that is present with the Trump approach. And it gives pause, I think, to those in India who want to have this relationship reach its full potential to build peace and prosperity throughout the world.
Right.
But how do you deal with this on a transactional basis?
All right,
So,
Mr. Vikri, just hold that thought. I've also got Nick Harper, who joins us at this stage. Mr. Harper, how do you read this agreement between India and the United States? It's premised, obviously, on India buying Venezuelan oil. That seems to have been, the key which unlocked a potential fortune for both sides in a trade deal. But apart from that, how do you actually see this?
Well, as we heard from our other guests there, I think we're really lacking details. It is this big, bold, fanfare type announcement from the president, but it really lacks many of the details that people will now want to work out whether this is a good deal for the United States, whether it's a good deal for India, whether both countries, as Donald Trump is suggesting, will do well out of this deal. But yeah, interesting to note that issue of oil. Oil has particularly angered the US president. Countries buying oil from Russia. We know, of course, that India has been one of those and was one that was threatened with far larger sanctions, with tariffs being imposed, if the buying didn't stop. Donald Trump presenting it in that Truth Social post that the buying of oil from Russia will now end, with New Delhi potentially buying United States oil, but also oil for Venezuela. Of course, that Venezuelan oil is something that the US is hoping to capitalize on, getting US companies into Venezuela to extract the oil, to sell it to the US, but also to market it to other countries as well. So the US president is looking for international buyers to be able to pick up that Venezuelan oil, and that seems to have been part of the unlocking of this deal, the reduction of tariffs on India now, potentially because oil played the really pivotal card in all of this actually taking place and coming together.
Shiv, obviously we don't have all the answers right now. We are waiting for a statement from the External Affairs Ministry, but I would suggest that this deal, assuming that there is a deal, I mean, Delhi has to say that there is, brings together these two large democracies, incredible strategic partners, people who've been friends. We rely on them for defense, for so many areas. So the relationship which was going south, I would suggest one way or the other will be stabilized.
Very true, Vishnu, and I agree with everyone who's just spoken on our panel just now that there's a dearth of detail, and we oftentimes know that the devil is in the details, especially when it comes to the things said by Trump. So we've got to report carefully. We are standing by for an Indian government statement which will doubtless carry a greater deal of measure and perhaps provide a greater degree of detail as to what exactly has been agreed upon between the two sides. But even accounting for all of that, Vishnu, I agree with you entirely. The words used by Trump are unusually detailed in terms of what has according to him, been agreed upon. He quotes data, he quotes percentages as far as the tariff figures are concerned. Those would easily be denied if they are untrue. We've got our External Affairs Minister who happens to be on American soil as we speak. That must have obviously been very much a part of this, as Aditya mentioned earlier. And therefore, I think it's perhaps only a matter of minutes, maybe a couple of hours, probably till tomorrow when the Indian side comes out with its own statement. This is the way in which Trump does things. Two countries that were in a trade dispute trying to get towards a deal would have probably issued a statement at the same time. But Trump doesn't wait for anyone. He's put out this statement in many ways to capture the narrative, set the mood, get the upper hand because the person who speaks next usually has to, has the discomfort.
So, Shiv, the word is grandstanding. And grandstanding. That's what Trump has done. Grandstanding, and Nick, you want to come in on this. This is, a grade one Trump game plan, right? Grandstand. I've done it. It's over. Here's what it is. We're great partners, great deal. Here's to the future. And he announces it without there being a joint statement, a joint tweet, a joint anything. And, we've been talking now for the last 15 odd minutes. 15 odd minutes, our External Affairs Ministry has not in New Delhi responded. They're obviously still trying to get a grasp of what he's said. So Trump operates at Trump standard time, and that's clearly not India standard time by any definition. Nick?
No, that's right. Trump's standard time seems to be the moment he puts down the phone on that foreign leader. He's already writing up his next Truth Social post. As we have seen time and time again, when there are these announcements from the US president, they come very quickly off the back of the conversation with the other world leader. And it's always presented in very positive tones. There's nothing negative about this very long social media post. He goes from point to point, really pointing out how the United States has benefited from his deal making. I think one other thing, just to note from all of this idea of him convincing Prime Minister Modi to buy American, it is something that has been part of the reduction of tariffs on other countries when it comes to the deal making, trying to get them to invest more in the United States or commit to buying more US products. And Donald Trump says that India will be buying at a much higher level, a whole range of different items, but also an additional $500 billion being put into US energy, technology, agriculture and coal. Those are all the type of things that are good news and sound very good to the US president. He can present them well to the public. And I think, like you say, he's grandstanding here, giving it an opportunity to show the voters out there that he once again has achieved another large deal with another country.
Very true. I want to bring in Aditya Rajkol in on this once again. Stay with me, Nick, and we'll be joined by more voices in just a moment. But Aditya, are you hearing from the External Affairs Ministry and the government? Are they likely to put out a statement today, or put out anything on sources? Because this is an explicit statement of some length that's come out from the Prime Minister, from the President of the United States. The White House has issued that same statement just a few seconds ago as well. It would seem a little odd to leave that hanging in the air for too long. The External Affairs Ministry must be on the job, Aditya.
Obviously, exactly. I mean, they would have been taken aback, but knowing Trump and his ways over the last 1 year or so, I think the MEA would be issuing a statement in a short while from now. They would be studying in accordance with the chief negotiator in the Ministry of Commerce, what all needs to be put out there. The finer print would have...
Can I just ask you to hold on for 1 second? We've got an important reaction from Sergio Gore, the US ambassador. As I have said many times, President Trump genuinely considers Prime Minister Modi a great friend. Thrilled by the news of the trade deal this evening, the relationship between the US and India has limitless potential. So there is, a further detail which is just coming over here from the US ambassador. So it is a trade deal. As far as Gore is concerned, it's a done deal. We've still not heard from the External Affairs Ministry, but this is the first American bureaucrat, the ambassador of the US to New Delhi, who has reacted just now. Shiv, any initial thoughts on this brief tweet by Gore?
You know, it was Ambassador Gore, Vishnu, who and you were one of the first Indian journalists to actually meet him when he took over. He put out that comment before Trump's statement saying, stand by. That was the first indication that something big was coming. You and I were chatting about it in the newsroom, and both of us actually got it bang on. That this was likely to be a large announcement towards the trade deal, if not the trade deal itself.
Yep.
And that's precisely what has been announced now. So this is the US ambassador, the new US ambassador to India, saying he's thrilled by the news of the trade deal, affirming once again what he has always believed about the relationship between Modi and Trump, which, as you and I know, Vishnu, has been one of the easier parts of this relationship. The genuine bonhomie and affection between Modi and Trump has played no small part in whatever has happened, but it has also resulted in the kind of tempestuous ups and downs, mostly from the United States as far as this trade negotiation is concerned. But once again, and I completely agree with you, Vishnu, we must exercise caution because big things have been stated by Trump and echoed now by the White House. So it's completely official now. It's from the US government itself, not just the president. And therefore, every minute counts as to when an Indian statement is going to be incoming. Vishnu, I'm wondering if you've heard anything from the government or from your sources.
I've asked them. There's stunned silence. Jayant Krishna joins us at this stage. Jayant, have you heard anything from anyone in the Indian system?
No, Vishnu, I have not heard anything. But, if you look at Rajesh Agrawal's statement, who's the Commerce Secretary and the Chief Negotiator from Indian side, I think he had shown a lot of optimism in a statement that was issued just 2 hours ago. So I'm not surprised to hear this. But what we do not know at this stage is, whether agriculture and dairy products are included or not included in this deal. So I think I haven't heard anything officially from any of the government sources. But since it has come from the White House as well, there has to be a degree of credibility to it, Vishnu.
No, I don't doubt it's happened. I just feel that a lot of the details, without being spelt out, doesn't quite make it as big a deal as Trump may be suggesting right now. So let's wait to see what those details are. Gauri, I think it's important to look at this in the context of the rhetoric from Donald Trump since Op Sindoor. The president of the US said that he had ended this particular war. New Delhi has said that India ended that war when Pakistan came to the table and said, we want a ceasefire. That happened on the 10th of May last year. And so there's been one, and the Prime Minister said this on the floor of Parliament, and yet Donald Trump repeatedly on Op Sindoor kept making all sorts of statements. Then, of course, there was the entire bit about India supporting Ukraine. That then became India buying Russian oil. Sanctions went up even more to 50% because of the import of Russian oil. And then suddenly it's all done. And I can't help but notice, Gauri, that bit of 25% on the import of Russian oils, there's no mention of that over here. Has that gone or not?
I think that's where the devil lies in details, so to say, Vishnu. You're right about pointing out the trajectory that it has taken, and in between that trajectory is when one saw some really harsh racist commentary also that came in from the Trump administration. That came down. That was tempered over a period of time because there was great realization on the US side as well that this is a relationship that's actually going down south because of those commentary that was coming in from Trump administration's senior officials. Having said that, there's still no clarity on not just the fact that the additional 25% where India was singled out, despite not being the largest importer either of Russian oil or of Russian natural gas. We don't have clarity on that. But the sense one gets from the message that that Donald Trump has put out is that because India has agreed to purchase Venezuelan oil in large quantities, that could be part of the trade negotiations. Again, no clarity unless and until it's put out. We can't really stick our neck and say that. But that seems to be the underlying tone of that message that Donald Trump has put out. And secondly, also on whether or not this is a limited trade deal, is this a full-fledged trade deal? Where are we going to, again, not just agriculture, but also dairy and several other sectors? Have they been included, or they've also been completely kept out? What about services? What about mobility? All those are aspects that really create and complete an entire trade agreement. We don't have details on that.
And here's another one. To quote Donald Trump, the Prime Minister also committed to buy American at a much higher level, in addition to over $500 billion of US energy, technology, agriculture, coal, and many other products. So, I mean, that appears that's a huge add-on to this entire process. I mean, and that doesn't seem to be a part of the trade deal necessarily. So Nick, we need to figure this out. India and the US have a very robust defense relationship that's worth billions of dollars, but it's nowhere close to $500 billion. So we need to see how that's going to work out, right?
Well, absolutely. And as we have seen with some other countries in the past, there is still some significant haggling over exactly what the terms of the investment might mean. And here I'm thinking of Japan. Donald Trump was very quick several months ago to announce that very large trade agreement, including billions of dollars of investment from the Japanese government. But then when the dust settled, the Japanese were suddenly trying to renegotiate the terms of the deal, as Donald Trump had laid out, because they simply said that the investment writ large by the US president was not quite what they were expecting. So Donald Trump, of course, can very quickly here in this social media post say $500 billion. But the devil, as we have been speaking about, is very much in the detail. How much US energy, technology, agriculture, all those different sectors, how much of each one of those would be bought into by the Indian government, that is not clear. It is a very nice round figure, a very big presentable headline for the US president. But when that all gets divided up, and if and when it gets corroborated by the Indian government, we may find that that $500 billion total, enormous that it is, might not be quite what the US president is presenting at this current moment.
So it's been it's approximately 9:22 p.m. India Standard Time, and it's 11:03 now. 9:22 is when Sergio Gore said, "Stay tuned, there's a big announcement coming." Gore being the US ambassador to New Delhi. It's now 11:03, so nearing 2 hours, and we haven't seen any reaction from the External Affairs Ministry, and I think that's telling. I do believe that that's telling. I believe New Delhi will walk a more cautious line. It typically does that. They will have something more specific in terms of the areas which are involved and the commitments which have been made. Shiv, if I can sound a note of caution, I think we'll have to really wait for what Delhi has agreed on to get an idea of the extent of this trade deal.
Completely agree, Vishnu. And I think, we owe it to our viewers especially to wait until we have the Indian government statement on this, because I have a feeling that many...
All right, Prime Minister Modi has responded. I've got a tweet from him just now. Sorry, Shiv, to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Wonderful to speak with my dear friend, President Donald Trump, today. Delighted that Made in India products will now have a reduced tariff of 18%. Okay, so that's confirmed, number one. Big thanks to President Trump on behalf of the 1.4 billion people of India for this wonderful announcement. When two large economies in the world's largest democracies work together, it benefits our people and unlocks immense opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. President Trump's leadership is vital for global peace, stability, and prosperity. India fully supports his efforts for peace. I look forward to working closely with him to take our partnership to unprecedented heights. So, Shiv, just as we were talking or saying a few minutes back, the India statement has literally 25% of the detail which Trump has shared. What India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has confirmed is that Indian products will now have a reduced tariff of 18%. Besides that, oil imports from the US, coal imports from the US, $500 billion, Venezuelan oil, all of that, not there.
Not there at all, Vishnu, and I think that's the most tantalizing aspect of it. The Modi government knows that oftentimes the claims made by Trump, are laden with little diplomatic traps. So it's best to keep things as vague as possible and only enunciate what has most definitely moved beyond the realm of negotiation and into actual fact. So we can confirm at this time that the Indian Prime Minister has validated the tariff aspect of it, moving to 18% for Indian products exported to the United States. But virtually every other assertion made by Trump, most notably, Vishnu, that the two sides have agreed to a trade deal, have conspicuously been left out. We don't know the reason for that. It doesn't immediately indicate that no trade deal has been reached, but it's possible that there may be some other issues before a more concrete or explicit statement is put out. But very, very interesting to see the level of detail in Trump's statement. Prime Minister Modi instead filling his statement with niceties, cordialities, praise for the Prime Minister, gratitude from the 1.5 billion people of India, but leaving only that one little detail hanging in the air, and that's about tariffs on Indian exports to the US.
No, absolutely. So we're trying to see if we can get more details. We're trying to see if we can get the US ambassador as well sooner than later. But Shiv, in fact, let me go across to Jayant Krishna. Mr. Krishna, what exactly are you seeing, or what exactly are you getting in terms of some of the detail and the divergence and the difference between the US and India in the tweets or the messages that both have done?
See, first of all, Vishnu, I think it's also the fact that India, has concluded a trade FTA with the European Union. I think that was also a trigger, perhaps, that both countries felt, and especially the US, that yes, such a deal should be signed as early as possible, right? So I think one thing has become very clear from Prime Minister's tweet, Indian Prime Minister's tweet, is that it is not that 25 is becoming 18; it is a 50% becoming 18. I think that's very clear. That 25%, penalty for us importing crude oil from Russia also has gone. I think that should be very, very clear, because if that's not the case and 50% becoming only 43%, it doesn't make sense at all, right? So I think effective rate is 18%, which is good. What we need to see is whether it applies to all the products around the, all across, or it's like the European Union deal, agriculture products, farm products have been kept outside the purview. That remains to be seen. But I think with this deal happening, one is that it should be inked very fast. It should be signed as early as possible. And the both countries need to, as the Prime Minister's statement says, that as the two largest democracies, we need to move ahead. And we have been strategic partners, and with so many deals in place, I think it augurs very well for India's overall export portfolio.
It's 8 minutes past 11 tonight, and this is the biggest story most certainly so far this year between India and the United States, with the two leaders signaling some kind of a trade ceasefire, definitely a de-escalation between the two sides in what has been, a series of historic lows, diplomatically speaking, between two countries which have otherwise been strategically very, very close. Aditya, I'm assuming that between now and tomorrow, okay, Aditya is going to come back to us in just a moment. In fact, can I request our producers to bring Aditya back? It's very important because I have to get my reporters in on this story to get. Let's get all our guests back on the screen very, very quickly. Rishabh Bhatnagar, my colleague from NDTV Profit, is live with me. Rishabh, what are you hearing from within the system? We've got Prime Minister Modi putting out his comment, confirming only one tiny detail, an important one nonetheless, of the slash in tariffs on Indian exports to the United States. But very tantalizingly, Rishabh, all of the other things mentioned by Trump have been left out. I'm assuming there will be some kind of a briefing from the Indian government at some point tomorrow, because these things obviously can't be left in the air. Rishabh.
Absolutely, Shiv. What we're looking at is more sort of clarity on the contours of this particular trade deal. So far, there's only confirmation of the reciprocal tariff bit, which is 25% being slashed by 7%. We still don't know the status of the 25% tariffs, the additional tariffs that were actually levied for the purchase of Russian crude oil, even though that is something that Donald Trump has actually addressed, that India has gradually weaned off Russian oil supply. So that is one. What we're also looking at is Donald Trump says that India wants to buy about $500 billion worth of products from the US. India actually imports roughly about $720 billion worth of products. So I don't see how $500 billion worth of that could come from the United States. Let's see what sort of a period Donald Trump is looking at for that one. So there's a lot of things, a lot of clarity still to come from within the Indian government. We're awaiting statements from the Commerce Ministry, who's been the anchor behind this particular trade deal. There's Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal, who was earlier the chief negotiator for this trade deal. He's expected to definitely brief something on this. Back to you.
Stay with me, Rishabh. Gauri Dwivedi wants to come in. Gauri, what are the unanswered questions that stand out to you right now as we report this developing story? 2 statements in so far.
Indeed, just taking on Shiv from what Rishabh was saying, in terms of numbers, how does this 500 billion add up? Because India's overall oil import bill is expected to be about $110 odd billion this year. That is the total oil import bill. Of course, a third of it comes from Russia. Even if that gets completely replaced by Venezuela, that is still only that much amount. Now, if you take the India-US trade, bilateral trade size, that is also about, roughly about $135 billion. We run a trade surplus. That's the whole point. That is the reason why Donald Trump gets upset. So how does all of this add up to $500 billion, $500 billion is something I think that is yet to be figured out. And that is, I think, where the big gap about understanding is right now.
No, and it won't be the first time that Trump has dropped figures that are later, corrected or clarified on. So I wouldn't read too much into that. Trump's, brand of announcing things are always subject to corrections and course corrections and clarifications. So we'll have to wait on that. The $500 billion figure, Gauri, that you've just mentioned, is perhaps one important example of that. Nisha Poddar, my colleague from NDTV Profit, also joins us on our live breaking coverage. NDTV was the first network to tell you that there could be a big trade announcement between the two sides around the corner. We did that about 8 hours ago today, and therefore we had sensed that something like this was afoot. Nisha, your take on this? Clearly there are unanswered questions. We're awaiting clarity from the Indian government as well. How are you reading this, Nisha?
Right. So this has come as a very, very important welcome move. And also remember, a very big certainty for our economy, for our manufacturing, exporting sector, the entire corporate India and the markets at large. Because the one important uncertain factor since April 2025 that the market and the economy was grappling with was this particular trade deal. While the government had another two-pronged strategy of negotiating with the US, which had been tough for the government, but on the other hand has opened the doors for several new economies and markets for our own exporters by signing several other FTAs. And the last one being the European Union, which was a big victory for the government. At the current moment, this particular negotiation is over. The announcement is that the reciprocal tariff is reduced from 25% to 18%. This is what we have got at the particular moment. But one big worry that I am now sensing after speaking to several market participants as well as corporate India is that whether it is 25 plus 18 or is it 25 earlier, which has been reduced to 18. This is one very critical and technical clarity that needs to be sought. Probably these are very early hours right now. and late in the night over here, we will be getting more clarity. But this particular clarity is required. If it is from 25 to 18, very, very good. If it is 25 plus 18, then it will come in as a big concern. It should likely be the earlier. That will be the wishful thinking. But that clarity is to be sought because many market participants are really speculating on this particular bit, and this technicality needs to be clarified. But overall, this particular certainty coming in will be a very, very welcome move for the Indian corporates as well as for the exporters and the market.
No, this is undoubtedly welcome news because, the two leaders of these two countries announcing, what is most definitely a de-escalation. And I deliberately use a military term here because what has happened between India and the United States is unprecedented in the history of their relationship. There have been many, many serious ups and downs. India has faced sanctions in the past from the United States as well. But what has happened over the last 8 to 9 months has been something that an entire generation hasn't seen as far as India-US relations are concerned in the post-Kargil era. Jayant Krishna, I know I don't want to jump the gun on things because, as our colleagues have just said, there are so many unanswered questions. We're awaiting detail on, what those percentage falls actually mean. Nisha's pointed to a very, very important need for clarity on what exactly Trump meant by that slashing of tariffs. But I'm wondering whether this ceasefire of sorts between the two sides means that even something like the H-1B issue could be on the table for negotiation, and there could be some solace in those areas as well. Pain points, Jayant.
So, Shiv, in today's day and age, countries do not necessarily get what they deserve.
Yeah.
They get what they negotiate, right? So while, India getting its quota of H-1B visas may or may not have been a part of this deal, but I think, it's bound to follow because as relations, get on the right track, I think this is bound to happen, and in due course of time, I think US would also realize that Indians who go on H-1B visas, they do a lot of good to their economy, right? I mean, they meet their skills deficit. They meet their global businesses because of cost arbitrage. Their business is globally competitive, right? So India is actually adding value to that country, instead of taking away American jobs. And if some sources are to be believed, very, very senior tech companies and other organizations in the US, businesses have actually gone back to White House and told that, yes, a complete stoppage of H-1B visas or a significant reduction therein it will be detrimental to those American companies, right?
Yeah.
I think it's bound to happen. I see it as a writing on the wall. Their relaxation would happen, and that tightening was also announced because as a pressure tactics by President Trump, right? So if this deal is through, then I see that as the next point on the negotiation table.
Okay, very interesting. Raymond Vickery continues to be with us. Raymond, do you want to weigh in on, we've all expressed our skepticism on taking everything that Trump has said so far at face value. The Indian Prime Minister's statement has also indicated that not everything may be fully tied up just yet. He's also not said anything about a trade deal being agreed upon, which is what the US president has said. What would you say comes next, Raymond?
Well, what comes next is to try to break through the fog of television performance that President Trump is so good at. If you think about this, this is a very strange way to run international affairs, one which really runs contrary to what's been happening for the last 80 years. In the ordinary course, when an agreement is reached, you have a joint statement between the parties involved as to what the terms are. And here President Trump jumps out as the reality TV star that he is for 14 years. He makes a statement, and everybody else has to come along and try to fill in. And it makes for live television, but it is no way to run international relations. So everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. When you have this $500 billion figure, President Trump throws out figures all the time, $600 billion in a year for investment from outside the U.S. And then you try to get into the details of it, and you find out that it really isn't that at all. It's something else entirely. And that's what's happened here. The reality is this deal has been on the table for a year or more. India has stood firm on the agricultural side of it. And I believe that India still is standing firm on it, whether it be dairy, whether it be chickens and what they're fed and so forth. And I think that Trump has just kept this in his side pocket for when he can announce it and get maximum benefit from it. Everybody knows that in the United States, domestically, he has huge problems now in Minneapolis with ICE coming on, with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And so this is a great way to throw it out and divert from those kinds of issues. That's not to say that this isn't welcome. Of course it's welcome, because the United States and India have been on an upward path for the last 30 years in terms of being natural partners. So it is welcome. But as a way to put to rest the difficulties and the opportunities which face the United States and India, it is by no means dispository of that situation.
Okay.
So we have to, on both sides, keep working at this to fight through the fog of television performance to see that the sound relationship which should exist between these two largest and greatest democracies is really fulfilled.
Okay. Nisha, you had a point to make. Go on.
Yes, that's right. While the speculation was rife just when the news came in, whether it's 25 plus 18, but my sources, after seeing our transmission here and our broadcast and the discussion, some of my sources have really reverted to me, and they have clarified that Sergio Gore, the US ambassador who had come to India, had clarified that it is from 50 now to 18. So that particular clarity is for the first time coming in from my sources at the particular moment who have got this clarification earlier. So yes, this is a very, very positive development. The whole doubt had occurred because 25% of the rest 50% was punitive basis the Russian oil buy by India. And that is one of the important negotiation chips that India has given, that they will be sourcing more oil from the US and then potentially from Venezuela, where US has taken over the oil assets. So therefore, this is going to be from 50 to 18, as Sergio Gore had earlier clarified. And this is the clarification here coming in.
That's huge.
So definitely a very, very positive move and a very big victory when it comes to negotiations with the US for India as a government, as a sovereign.
Huge, huge. Gauri, bringing you back in, give us a sense of what it must have taken to get to this point. Given that the trade battle lines had been drawn by both sides, India had refused to cow down to the ridiculous demands that had been made, we understand, by the American side. And the fact that some kind of a middle ground appears to have been achieved, that in itself appears to be a really big situation, because I remember, we were chatting about this and wondering how long this trade negotiation is going to go on for. And we were talking about months, perhaps even over a year. That they've been able to reach so far means compromises must have happened on both sides, Gauri.
And Shiv, is also indicative of the fact that India has the stomach to do these big trade negotiations. We closed one with UK, we closed one with EU, and on our terms is what we have been able to do so with US. If what Nisha is saying is correct, as her sources are pointing out, at 18%, we are 2% cheaper than Vietnam. We are just about 3% more expensive than Japan. Japan closed it at 15%. Vietnam is 20%. I'm not counting some of the other smaller economies like Bangladesh and others. So to that extent, it's a great deal at 18% and without nominating President Trump for a Nobel. And being able to do negotiations on our own terms. And that included also looking the Trump administration in the eye in the face of those really racist personal attacks that came in, where India was very responsible, Shiv. We were very responsible, matured in our handling of the situation. It was very volatile, but we stuck to our core demand, which is that our national interest in terms of our domestic industry needs to be protected, even in the wake of such volatility.
Jayant, apart from the obvious sort of wisdom, which is that nothing is over until it's over, and even then it's not over in Trump's world, I think the Indian government, the Indian diplomatic machinery, will perhaps never again take its eye off the ball when it comes to US relations, even for a moment, and especially under this president.
No, absolutely. I think if you look at the history in the last 10 months or so, I think no matter whether talks were on or not on, but, I'm given to understand almost 50% of the focus of Ministry of Commerce and the key team there has been on the US, and 50% is all countries put together, including countries like Australia, UK, European Union, UAE, and wherever we have had a deal. So I think, given that, the American behavior has been changing very, very fast, and, the responses on one hand calling India a failed economy, the next day calling Prime Minister Modi a great friend and a great leader, and so on and so forth. So I think there has been so much of oscillation. The pendulum has been going to the two extremes so very often that, it was keeping Indian negotiation team on the toes all through last 10 months that I have some insights of. So I think it's interesting, but I don't think there'll be, one needs to be unduly worried about, because one thing is very clear. Even Prime Minister's statement has said very clearly it is 18% is what exporters will have to pay, right? So it's not 43%, it is 18%. Yeah. I think that becomes very clear. And I think if you look at some of the countries like Vietnam, Sri Lanka, they have 20%. If you look at Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, they have 19%. So we are slightly better off than that. With the European Union, they have 15%. We are still 3% higher. And Japan and UK have 10%. So I think we are still higher. But I think 18% is something which is, I would think, of course, it could have been lower, but it is reasonable. And Indian exports can absorb that, can bring, more cost efficiency and so on and so forth. And will be able to sustain, 18% tariff. So I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of promise going forward. And I personally believe that, if this falls through and it doesn't get converted into a signed deal very early, that, then the US stands to lose its face, I agree. More than anybody else.
I completely agree with that. This is something that the US needs at least as much as India does. The initiative is going to have to be from the United States, given that they've brought the two countries to this very turbulent pass. With a tempestuous president. But having said that, it is worth noting that the president has used unusually affectionate words for the Prime Minister, even for someone who is quite, generous with his compliments when he's talking about someone he shares a good rapport with, deeply respected in his country. We are two leaders that get things done. This couldn't have been managed by anybody else. Lots of effusive praise, by Trump. But there are obviously unanswered questions. Rishabh, bringing you in here. Okay, we've lost Rishabh, but let me bring Gauri in on that then. Gauri, we both know that this entire Trump tariff terror and turbulence has, driven India in a direction of, never before reforms. We've seen it even in the union budget, some of those announcements yesterday, and some of the structural reforms that the Indian government announced late last year were all in keeping with a kind of realization that you can't depend on old friendships and old trade partnerships either. India has to be extremely self-reliant and, much of its capacity has to be homegrown. But having said that, there are going to be decisions that will need to be taken very, very quickly, because Trump is also a kind of person who changes his mind. The written and signed document is no longer sacred in Trump's world. So it's going to be a sleepless night for the Indian government.
Indeed, it will be. I expect an executive order with his trademark style, using his spell pen to probably get this thing going. But having said that, yes, this has been a trade negotiation and a deal that has been in the works since February 11th, when Prime Minister Modi traveled to the US last year, 3 weeks into Donald Trump's second term. Since then, the back and forth has been quite significant. And also the realization that came in for India that at the end of the day, these trade vagaries and uncertainties are only going to increase. We need to insulate some of our most impacted and exposed sectors, and also those sectors which are extremely labor intensive in nature, which is why the budget yesterday focused a lot on labor intensive sectors, protecting employment, creating employment. And that, I think, is the bigger realization that has come in the wake of Trumpland. You need to protect some of those sectors which are most exposed to US. That's the first thing. And second, also, I think the fact is India has realized that, yes, 4 years consecutively, our largest exposure, largest trade partnership has been with the US, but we need to look at other markets. The fact that we've been able to close the mother of all deals with EU, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we couldn't make much progress with Donald Trump, given the kind of arrogance and stubbornness that they had, imposing an additional 25% on us. So that moved Indian negotiators to look at other markets even more aggressively. We signed EU, we signed UK, we signed New Zealand, and we are willing to sign other trade pacts very quickly. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we were exposed to a lot of uncertainties in our trade relationship with the US.
There's been an important statement from the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. This is, an entity which has really been driving the trade equation between both countries. And they are welcoming the reduction of the reciprocal tariff from 25% to 18%. They're calling it an important first step. And I think the important clarification that we seem to get a little while back is that, in fact, the tariff on the India's continued import of Russian oil has for the moment gone away as well, that the overall tariff is at 18%. If that is indeed the case, then that is a huge, huge benefit, one that really helps India's industry. So Padmaja joins us as well. Padmaja, we've seen a statement from the Prime Minister. He's welcomed this, albeit not with as much detail as the Americans have announced thus far.
Absolutely. And in fact, over the next few hours, it's going to be very crucial to hear a more detailed statement coming in from the government. Right now, there is a more precautionary, a more cautious statement that has come from the Indian side as opposed to what Donald Trump said or what even Sergio Gore has said. Just to bring our viewers up to speed, those who are joining us right now on this big, big news story, Prime Minister Modi said, "Wonderful to speak with my dear friend President Trump today. Delighted that made in India products will now have a reduced tariff of 18%. Big thanks to President Trump on behalf of 1.4 billion people of India for this wonderful announcement. When two large economies and the world's largest democracies work together, it benefits our people and unlocks immense opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. President Trump's leadership is vital for global peace, stability and prosperity. India fully supports his efforts for peace." But what is critical here is to remember that right now, a very important point that has been made by Nisha Poddar, and for the viewers who just tuned in, Nisha, if you could again explain, because there is still a little bit of clarity needed of exactly how the tariffs have been reduced from 50% to 18% or from 25% to 18%. What should we understand? If you could just please elaborate on that, because there's still a little fuzziness about that detail.
All right, we'll come back to Nisha in a moment from now, get that line up. But I do believe that what Nisha was reporting earlier on, Padmaja, was important, that it has come down to 18% at this juncture. So remember, there were sanctions, there were tariffs rather, which had been introduced earlier on. Then there were further tariffs, which brought it up to 50%. But that's come down now. Jayant Krishna, how do you actually look at this? And I think the really important point is that it's operational as far as Trump is concerned immediately. So we should see immediate benefits for Indian industry looking to get into the US.
I think it's going to be a very widely welcomed by the Indian industry, especially those which were exporting to the US. And a lot of companies which are exporting to the US, they had generally been laying most of their eggs in the American basket. So it's going to be a wonderful news for them. And their business, their operations, their exports have suffered in the last few months since it became operative. And I think it's going to be welcomed by all sectors, be it leather, be it gems and jewelry, be it electronics anyway, and smartphones were kept outside the purview of 50% tariff. So I think a lot of sectors, industrial products, textiles, garments, oil seeds, fruits. Chemicals, they'll largely benefit. Pharma will not be affected much because it was kept outside the purview of 50% tariff. So I think Indian industry is largely going to welcome it, and it should be business as usual back for all of them. And 18% is a tariff, vis-a-vis what has been finalized with Japan, UK, South Korea, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, these kind of Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, these kind of countries, vis-a-vis them, it is reasonable. Of course, it is higher than European Union, higher than UK and Japan and South Korea. But with most other nations, I think it is competitive, and India should be able to, do good business, good exports with them once it becomes operative.